All right, we have more changes unfolding in the Golden State. Changes that have the crazy policies coming out of California continuing one bad policy after another, all of which seem to be based around one thing, have one single idea: control. Control what you do, handcuff you, do what we say is okay and nothing else. Well, the latest idea is completely insane. In fact, it's straight out of the WEF Great Reset Handbook. This policy was proposed by the WEF in 2023. They started rolling it out in some European countries this year, but no politician in the States dared touch this until now. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps out the channel, and consider subscribing so you don't miss these regular updates. So 4 years ago, California Governor Gavin Newsom unveiled the bullet train. 4 or 5 years ago, a high-speed railway system. The plan, as Newsom hailed it, was to build public transportation for the 21st century, a system that would run from San Francisco to LA in under 3 hours, reaching speeds of over 200 miles an hour, modeled, by the way, after China's high-speed rail, who Gavin looks up to. But unlike China, who actually completed their project in record time, Gavin Newsom's project failed. It cost California upwards of $16 billion, and in the end, the project was scrapped. This is what the governor said 5 years ago. Watch this.
Abandoning the high-speed rail entirely means we will have wasted billions and billions of dollars with nothing but broken promises, partially fulfilled commitments, and lawsuits to show for it.
Well, 5 years later, what we're left with is 600 meters of steel framing in the Central Valley. That's it, 600 meters of railway just sitting there, not usable, useless. And $16 billion later, the state now is stuck in a $55 billion deficit, on the verge of bankruptcy. And mind you, California has the highest state income taxes in the country at 14.4%. It's got the highest sales tax in the country at 7.25%. Highest gas tax at 78 cents a mile. So why then, how is California in this position? Why, after all that money it takes from us, does the state rank third worst in the country for road quality? All that money you give them, and they're at the bottom of the list, 47th out of 50 of states for road quality. Well, it's the same reason why California spent that $16 billion to build a high-speed railway system, and they let the project implode. Incompetence and corruption. So how do they plan to get us out of this mess? I'll let you guess, folks. Even more taxes. But this time they may have gone one step too far. Gavin's new plan, the Dems' new plan to save California, is to charge drivers by the mile. Not just a gas tax, but a road tax. Every mile you drive in California will soon cost you. This isn't just an idea, by the way. This is about to get rolled out, and it gets worse. How do you think they plan to track this? How will they know how many miles you drive on California roads? How do you think? Forced GPS integration. Talk about Big Brother, folks. People always said that California would tax the air that we breathe if they could. That was the running joke. These people are relentless, and the crazy thing is they're going to get reelected. We'll look at this proposal in a second, how they plan to require all new cars sold in California to be integrated with the state. How, if this passes, all new cars sold will have GPS integrated with state headquarters and in real time, by the way, for new cars. But real quick, there was a time when the majority of Californians were civil libertarians and would never allow something like this to stand. They'd throw Gavin out of office at the snap of a finger if he was inserting himself into their private lives. But today, far too many Dems put their trust in government, believing and obeying, never questioning authority or standing up to power. The government is to be trusted, right? Even questioning the state makes you a right-wing extremist. We all saw how far they'd go during the pandemic, the state inserting themselves into virtually every aspect of our private lives, mandating when you could leave your house, who could visit you at your house, where you could go, arresting people walking on the beach mandating the vax, and a majority of Californians just followed along. Not everybody, but the majority did, even turning their neighbors and friends into authorities for breaking these ridiculous rules. Well, now they're leveling up, going one step further, allowing the government to literally track our every move. No warrant, no probable cause, for the simple reason that they can, and because they know that the people won't stand up against it. All of it right in line with the mandates that we saw during COVID. So check this out. Caltrans, California Department of Transportation, has an entire website just for this new plan called CaliforniaRoadCharge.com, CARoadCharge.com, explaining why they're planning to do this, how they have to do it, they say, and how it's going to work. Wait till you see this. Look at this. What is the road charge, they say? Quote, road charge is an alternative funding mechanism that allows drivers to support road and highway maintenance based on how many miles they drive instead of how many gallons of gas they use. Just like you pay your gas and electric bills based on how much of these utilities you use, a road charge, also called a mileage-based user fee, is a fair and sustainable way to fund road maintenance, preservation, and improvements for all Californians instead of paying the state's gas tax, which disproportionately impacts those who cannot afford more fuel-efficient vehicles. Everyone would pay a per-mile fee for how much they use the road, regardless of what kind of car they drive, unquote. So let me get this straight. The state of California has been on a 24/7 marketing blitz for the last 5 years, longer, to convince you to trade in your gas vehicle for an EV, even offering rebates, tax incentives if you do. That plan has thus worked so well that now too many Californians are skirting by the gas tax. They say if you drive an EV, you don't pay the gas tax, right? Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't that part of the promise for buying an electric vehicle in the first place? So they hoodwink you into getting rid of your gas vehicle by playing up all the money you're going to save. Then once they accomplish their goal, they end up charging you anyways. Pretty sure a lot of people, if they knew about this in the first place, they never would have traded in their gas vehicle, right? And they write this on their website, quote, California leads the nation when it comes to driving more fuel-efficient and zero-emission cars. That's a good thing, they say. However, because these cars consume less or no gas at all, funding highway and road repairs based on a gas tax no longer works. Even if we keep increasing the gas tax with fewer Californians buying gas, the funding will eventually disappear. California needs to replace the gas tax with a funding system that supports our state's transportation future, unquote. And the scariest part about this, how they plan to track your miles. Well, if you have an older vehicle that doesn't have its GPS integrated, they're going to send you a plug-in device to upload your data to them. Quote, plug-in device. A device will be shipped to your home with instructions on how to plug it into your vehicle's OBD2 port, typically located under the steering wheel. If you choose to use GPS location data, then this option will report any miles driven out of state on private roads or on tribal roads, unquote. For newer vehicles and all future cars, well, it's called vehicle telematics. Quote, vehicle telematics. This option is available for newer vehicles that have a connected vehicle account through the auto manufacturer. Tell me, folks, what do you think they plan to use this data for? Do you see them stopping with the road charge? Government has no business knowing where, when, or how you drive. This is China-level Big Brother at work. And remember, all of this because they can't afford to fix our roads. Why? How? Does every other state afford it, but California can't? Californians are forced to pay double the average state tax. It's insanity. They spend our money foolishly, get themselves into this mess, and their solution, take more money out of our pockets. Something needs to change in California. All right, that wraps up the news portion of this video. Now all right, we have more changes unfolding over at the U.S. Supreme Court. Changes that just saw a landmark ruling on Friday, forcing a major policy reversal. The reversal of a policy that's been set in stone for years. This one policy has given these left-wing governments, politicians, the leeway that they needed to turn our cities upside down, to allow homelessness, for example, to soar. And most interesting of all, the one state above the rest that's been forced into a corner by Friday's decisions, California. And the governor himself, Gavin Newsom. Gavin, you have some decisions to make. finally, accountability may be coming to California. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps out the channel. And consider subscribing so you don't miss these regular updates. So for the last decade or so, homelessness and crime have been rising around the country. West Coast cities in particular, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, San Jose even, just to name a few, have been overrun. San Francisco, once one of the most beautiful cities in the country, maybe even the world, a true gem of a city. Ask anyone who's grown up there what it was like, say, 15 years ago even, compared to today. You walk through some of these neighborhoods now and they're virtually unrecognizable, filled with homeless encampments. Once nice neighborhoods today look like you're walking through the ghettos of Afghanistan or through the filth of Mumbai, India. It's hard to imagine you can wreck a city as beautiful as San Francisco, but they have. In fact, it's gotten so bad, San Fran's been nicknamed Mini Tent City, just like Seattle was a few years before. Now, most people who hear about this problem, they wonder why. How did this happen? It's a question that has to be answered. What changed? What's different out west? Why are these West Coast cities having so much of an issue, so much of a problem? Why don't I see this, for example, in my local city, right? Well, the homelessness aspect specifically can be traced back to one decision made in 2018 by the judges of the uber-liberal Ninth Circuit Court, who okayed the idea of pitching a tent anywhere you want, on a sidewalk, a public park, in front of an elementary school. Now let me just say, in principle, I agree with this sort of idea. The last thing I want is the government telling me what I can or can't do, where I can do what I want or can't do what I want. For example, I've been traveling in the PNW for months. One of the great things about it is after driving all day, you could just pull over on a local Forest Service road, make camp, nobody bothers you. It gives you a sense of freedom, real freedom. You could pitch your tent, build a campfire, make a cup of coffee, no plan on exactly where you're headed. Now, to some people, that probably sounds awful, but if that doesn't sound awful to you, I'd recommend giving it a try. It's actually a pretty good feeling. But obviously, there's assholes out there that take advantage of this. Assholes like these left-wing politicians who have used this Ninth Circuit decision to argue that their hands are tied, that their agency's hands are tied by this ruling, that it prohibits them from stopping these massive homeless encampments that pop up. And the one politician who's now most in the crosshairs, forced into a corner after this, is California Governor Gavin Newsom. This guy single-handedly used this ruling more than anyone else, constantly. For the last 6 years, this was his go-to excuse. The reason he gave over and over and over again whenever he was asked during an interview or on a debate stage why his state has such a homeless problem. Why, Governor, does California have this problem but Florida doesn't? Why does California make up 12% of the U.S. population but 28% of U.S. homelessness? Why he just lets it happen? And he would argue how his hands are tied, how the Ninth Circuit ruled homeless encampments are untouchable. Watch.
Newsom saying California has invested billions to address homelessness, but rulings from the bench have tied the hands of state and local governments to address this issue. The Supreme Court can now correct course and end the costly delays from lawsuits that have plagued our efforts to clear encampments and deliver services to those in need.
Well, good news, major news, in fact. The Supreme Court just took that excuse away, ruling 6-3 on a landmark decision Friday for cities to enforce bans on homeless people sleeping outdoors. This case comes from Grants Pass, Oregon. If you've never been, it's actually a pretty neat little city. I spent some time in Grants Pass recently. It's a small, nice place positioned almost at the base of this bowl, surrounded by mountains. Real pretty city, and the people of Grants Pass wanted to keep it that way after homeless encampments began popping up in their local city park. And realized Grants Pass, it's not a big city. A homeless encampment affects everyone there. Well, the city tried to block it from happening, only to be met with the ire of its liberal governor telling Grants Pass, the homeless encampments popping up, you can't touch them. You touch them, you break the law. So Grants Pass, they filed a lawsuit that made its way to the highest court in the land. And on Friday, 4 days ago, they ruled Grants Pass and every city in the country has not only the right to remove these homeless encampments, these tent cities, sweep these tent cities, but that the Ninth Circuit's ruling setting in place prohibitions on on these homeless encampments, their cruel and unusual punishment ruling, that you can crumple it up and throw it away. Watch.
A landmark decision from the U.S. Supreme Court on the issue of homelessness. In a 6-3 vote, the High Court cleared the way for cities to enforce bans on homeless people sleeping outdoors when there's no shelter space. The case centered around Grants Pass. The Southern Oregon city tried to block people from sleeping and camping in public spaces, including sidewalks, streets, and city parks. On Friday, the High Court found those rules did not violate constitutional protections against cruel and unusual punishment. The decision is likely to alter how cities and states throughout the West handle homelessness.
And think about this, all those left-wing politicians, the governors of the Northwest states in Washington, Oregon, California, like Gavin Newsom, no longer have an excuse for why they support these crack dens and homeless encampments, how they let that one Ninth Circuit ruling lead to all this other bureaucratic nonsense, led to all the wasted time and taxpayer money to keep the illusion going that they want to solve the homeless problem, throwing billions of dollars away on ridiculous programs to study homelessness, study the inequity of homelessness. It's all a sham, folks. In the interim of that, while they've been lying to us, $20 billion from Gavin Newsom's office spent on this issue, studying the inequity of homelessness. $20 billion, actually $24 billion to be exact, that's unaccounted for now, by the way. If you remember, last month, the state auditor's office said California can't account for over $24 billion in taxpayer money that Gavin spent on his homeless program. $24 billion just gone. And realize California is facing a $50 billion deficit this year, meaning the state brings in less than it makes. They're $50 billion short. It can't pay the bills this year, can't keep the lights on without raising our taxes this year even more, borrowing even more. And this is what he wants to bring, by the way, to a national level. He's been groomed for the White House, folks. He's on their short list. Even after all the screw-ups and failed policies, realize California, highest homeless population in the country. That one state makes up 28% of our nation's homeless population. It's nearly doubled since he's been governor, and he's got the nerve to want to bring this nonsense to the rest of the country. He wants to expand these tent cities on a national level, saying California's homeless policy is a national model for what's to come. You can't make this up. Watch.
If there's any good news, and I'll close on this officially, state of California has seen a decline in veterans homelessness. We have a national model. What Proposition 1 did is it reinforced that model, provided more resources to advance that model, and we're very excited to get those dollars to work.
And to think Newsom's being considered seriously as Biden's replacement. Help us all if that were to happen. The good news, though, is that polling shows Trump trouncing Newsom if he were to be Biden's replacement. In March, Rasmussen polled 912 swing voters. They found Trump would win in a head-to-head matchup against Newsom by, get this, 17 points. Then in February, Emerson College ran a similar poll with 1,225 registered voters. It showed Trump would win by 10 points. He'd be doing better, Newsom would, all these politicians would, if they would just tell us what they believe. If he supports homelessness, then say it. Tell California that. Be honest. Defend your policies. It's the same thing with illegal immigration. They pretend they oppose it. Joe Biden says he opposes open borders, yet 10 million illegal migrants were just allowed to walk right across the southern border in the last 3 years. Americans see right through this crap. It's the reason why the former president is so popular. Donald Trump, he's got his faults, but you know what the guy's thinking. You know what you're getting. He says what he believes. It's refreshing. But Gavin Newsom, Tina Kotek, Oregon's governor, Jay Inslee, Washington's governor, they tell us one thing, they do something else. Well, now they're about to be called on it. Let's see what they do next.